I am Richard Lawson, 52 years old. For 21 years, I built the compliance department at Meridian Financial from nothing into the most respected regulatory team in the industry. And for every single one of those years, my boss, Marcus Sterling, reminded me that someone with my background, someone who came from a public university instead of an Ivy League school, should be grateful just to have a seat at the table. But the worst humiliation didn't come from the condescension or the passed-over promotions, or watching Marcus's nephew Tyler get the VP title I had earned 3 times over. It came on a Tuesday morning in September, in the middle of our quarterly board meeting with 40 executives and board members present, when Tyler stood up during my compliance presentation and said, "I think we all know that Richard's approach to regulatory oversight is outdated, and frankly, it's holding this company back from the aggressive growth strategies we need to compete in today's market." The room went silent. Marcus nodded slowly from his position at the head of the table, like Tyler had just said something profound instead of something catastrophically stupid. The board members, most of whom had never spent a day actually working in financial compliance, murmured their agreement. Tyler looked at me with barely concealed contempt and said, "Maybe it's time we brought in someone who understands that compliance is supposed to enable business, not obstruct it." They had no idea that the outdated compliance officer they just humiliated in front of the entire executive team was the only person standing between Meridian Financial and a federal investigation that would destroy the company. I was holding documentation of 47 regulatory violations that Tyler had personally approved in the last 6 months, violations that carried a minimum fine of $15 million and a maximum penalty of complete license revocation. And in exactly 72 hours, I had a scheduled meeting with the Office of Financial Regulation, a meeting I had been postponing for 3 months while I tried to fix Tyler's disasters internally. I was the only person who could make that meeting go away, or I could walk into that federal office and tell them everything. The conference room smelled like expensive coffee and leather chairs, the kind of room designed to make you feel like important decisions were being made even when those decisions were idiotic. I stood at the front with my presentation slides behind me, 21 years of compliance data showing how every regulatory framework I had built had protected Meridian from the scandals that had destroyed our competitors. The slide on the screen showed our clean regulatory record: 0 major violations, 0 federal investigations, 0 license suspensions. A record that Marcus had once, in a rare moment of honesty 5 years ago, told me had saved the company at least $200 million in fines and legal fees. But that was 5 years ago, before Tyler arrived. Tyler Sterling was 32 years old, Harvard Business School, 6 years of experience total, 4 of those at a hedge fund that had been shut down for securities violations that Tyler swore he had nothing to do with. Marcus had hired him 18 months ago and immediately made him Senior Vice President of Business Development, a position that gave him authority over which deals the company pursued and how aggressively we went after them. Within 6 months, Tyler had started pushing back on every compliance recommendation I made. Too conservative, too slow, too focused on hypothetical risks instead of real opportunities. He had started approving transactions that I had flagged as regulatory problems, overriding my objections with phrases like strategic imperative and calculated risk tolerance. And Marcus had backed him every time because Tyler was family, and I was just the compliance guy from a state school who should be grateful to have a job. I finished my presentation and asked for questions. The board members looked bored. This was the compliance section of the meeting, the obligatory part where they pretended to care about regulatory requirements before getting back to the exciting discussions about revenue growth and market expansion. Tyler raised his hand. I called on him, even though I knew it was a mistake. "Richard, I want to push back on something you said about our transaction review process." His voice was confident, the tone of someone who had never been truly challenged in his life. "You mentioned that we rejected 12 major transactions in the last quarter due to compliance concerns. That's 12 opportunities we walked away from, probably $50 million in revenue, because of what you called regulatory red flags." "That's correct," I said. "Each of those transactions had significant compliance issues that could have exposed the company to federal sanctions." Tyler smiled, and it wasn't friendly. "Or, and hear me out here, Those were opportunities that required creative structuring instead of blanket rejection. I've worked with 3 other firms that would have found ways to make those deals work within the regulatory framework. We're leaving money on the table because our compliance approach is stuck in 2005. Several board members nodded. I saw Marcus lean back in his chair, watching Tyler with obvious pride. Creative structuring is another term for regulatory arbitrage, I said carefully. And regulatory arbitrage is what the OFR classifies as attempted circumvention of federal guidelines. It's the fastest way to trigger an investigation. Only if you get caught, Tyler said, and the room actually laughed. Not all of them, but enough. Enough that I knew exactly where this was heading. Only if you get caught, I repeated slowly. Tyler, that's not how compliance works. Our job is to ensure the company operates within federal regulations, not to find clever ways around them. Your job, Tyler said, and his voice had an edge now, is to enable business growth while managing risk, not eliminating risk, managing it. And frankly, I think we all know that your approach to regulatory oversight is outdated, and frankly, it's holding this company back from the aggressive growth strategies we need to compete in today's market. The words hung in the air. I looked at Marcus, waiting for him to intervene, to remind Tyler that compliance wasn't optional, that we had a legal and ethical obligation to follow federal regulations. Marcus said nothing. Maybe it's time we brought in someone who understands that compliance is supposed to enable business, not obstruct it, Tyler continued. He was looking at the board members now, not at me, playing to the audience. Someone with experience in high-growth environments who knows how to balance regulatory requirements with commercial reality. Are you suggesting we replace our chief compliance officer? One of the board members asked. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she was the only person in the room who looked uncomfortable with where this conversation was going. I'm suggesting we might want to evaluate whether Richard's approach aligns with the company's strategic direction, Tyler said smoothly. This isn't personal. It's about making sure we have the right people in the right positions to take Meridian to the next level. I felt something cold settle in my chest. 21 years. 21 years of protecting this company, of staying late to review transactions, of pushing back against bad ideas from executives who thought compliance was just paperwork and box checking. 21 years of being treated like I was lucky to be here. I'd like to hear from Richard, Patricia said. You've been with Meridian longer than almost anyone in this room. What's your response to Tyler's concerns? I looked at Tyler. This kid who had been here 18 months and thought he understood the industry better than people who had been doing this for decades. Then I looked at Marcus, who was studiously avoiding eye contact. Then I looked at the board members, most of whom were already mentally moving on to the next agenda item. My response, I said carefully, is that compliance exists to protect the company from regulatory action that could destroy it. Every transaction I've rejected in the last quarter had specific violations of federal guidelines. I've documented all of them in detail. Those documents are in the compliance files, available for review by anyone who wants to see them. We're not questioning your documentation, Tyler said dismissively. We're questioning your judgment about which risks are acceptable. Federal regulations aren't about acceptable risk, I said. They're about legal requirements. You don't get to decide which laws to follow based on how much money you might make. Everything is about acceptable risk, Tyler shot back. That's literally what business is, and if you can't understand that, then maybe you're in the wrong job. The room was silent. I could feel the decision crystallizing around me. This wasn't a discussion about compliance philosophy. This was a setup. They had decided before this meeting that I was the problem, and Tyler was just providing the public justification. I need to be very clear about something, I said, and my voice was steady even though my hands were shaking. If this company moves forward with the aggressive growth strategies Tyler is proposing, without proper compliance oversight, you will be investigated by the OFR within 6 months. That's not a hypothetical. That's a certainty. And when that investigation happens, every transaction we've approved, Every deal we've structured, every document we've filed will be scrutinized by federal regulators who have teams of lawyers and unlimited time to find violations. We appreciate your concern, Marcus said, speaking for the first time. His voice was dismissive, the tone you'd use with a child who was being dramatic. But I think Tyler has a point about balancing risk management with business growth. We'll take your concerns under advisement. Under advisement. That was corporate speak for, we're ignoring you. The meeting moved on to the next agenda item, and I sat down at the table, invisible again, while they discussed expansion plans and revenue targets and market share. After the meeting ended, I went back to my office on the 4th floor, the office I'd occupied for 12 years, with my degrees on the wall and my family photos on the desk and my files meticulously organized in the cabinets that lined the room. My assistant Jennifer appeared in the doorway. She was 28, brilliant, had been with the company for 3 years. She looked worried. "Richard, what just happened in there?" "I think I just got fired," I said. "They didn't say it directly, but that's what's coming." "That's insane. You're the only reason this company has a clean regulatory record." "Clean regulatory records don't generate revenue," I said. "And revenue is all they care about." My phone buzzed. An email from Marcus. "Richard, please come to my office at 4 p.m. We need to discuss your future with the company." I showed the email to Jennifer. She read it and said something very unprofessional. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I thought about the file in my locked cabinet, the one labeled OFR Compliance Review 2024. The file that contained documentation of every regulatory violation Tyler had approved or attempted to approve in the last 6 months. 47 violations ranging from inadequate disclosure requirements to outright falsification of transaction documentation. Each violation I had documented with the date, the specific regulation violated, the evidence, and the risk assessment. Each violation I had flagged to Tyler with a formal compliance objection that he had overridden. Each violation that created legal liability for the company and for every executive who had approved it. "I'm going to see what Marcus has to say," I told Jennifer. "And then I'm going to make some decisions about my future. If you are reading this and you have ever been the person who did everything right, who protected people from their own worst instincts, only to be treated like you were the problem, I need you to know that competence is often threatening to people who succeed through connections instead of merit. Hit that like button if you have ever been pushed out for refusing to go along with something you knew was wrong. And in the comments, write these 3 words. I held the line. Let's build a wall of validation for everyone who chose integrity over popularity. At 4 p.m., I walked to Marcus's office on the executive floor. His assistant waved me through without a word, which told me she already knew what this meeting was about. Marcus's office was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that probably cost more than my annual salary, and enough empty space to play racquetball. Marcus sat behind his desk, and Tyler sat in one of the leather chairs facing it. They had coordinated this. Of course they had. "Richard, sit down," Marcus said. His voice was formal, careful. This was going to be a scripted conversation. I sat in the chair next to Tyler, deliberately leaving space between us. "I'm going to get straight to the point," Marcus said. "The board has asked me to evaluate the leadership structure of our compliance department. After this morning's discussion and several conversations I've had with other executives, there's a consensus that we need to move in a different direction." "You're firing me," I said flatly. "We're offering you a resignation package," Marcus corrected. "Effective immediately. 6-month severance, full benefits for a year, and a neutral reference. In exchange, you'll sign a standard separation agreement with confidentiality and non-disparagement clauses. And if I don't resign? Then we'll have to explore termination for cause, which would be considerably less generous." I looked at Tyler, who was trying very hard to look professional instead of triumphant. He was failing. "What's the cause?" I asked. "Failure to align with the company's strategic direction," Marcus said. "Consistent resistance to business development initiatives. Inability to adapt to a changing regulatory environment." "Those are euphemisms for refusing to approve illegal transactions," I said. Marcus's expression hardened. Richard, I've given you a very generous offer. I suggest you take it and move on with your life. What about the OFR meeting? I asked. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Tyler sat up straighter. Marcus's eyes narrowed. What OFR meeting? The one scheduled for Friday morning with Senior Examiner Danielle Foster regarding our transaction review protocols for the last 2 quarters. The meeting I've been postponing while I tried to remediate the compliance issues internally. The meeting where I'm supposed to present our complete transaction files and explain our approval process. Marcus and Tyler exchanged a look. You didn't think to mention this meeting before, Marcus said, and his voice had an edge now. I mentioned it 6 weeks ago in my monthly compliance report, page 12, section on regulatory communications. Perhaps you didn't read that section. Cancel the meeting, Marcus said. I can't cancel it. The OFR doesn't take cancellations. If I don't show up, they'll initiate a formal investigation automatically. That's standard procedure when a regulated entity fails to appear for a scheduled examination. Then you'll go to the meeting and tell them everything is fine, Tyler said. I looked at him. This kid who thought compliance was something you could charm your way through like a networking event. Tyler, I'm not going to lie to a federal regulator. That's a felony. You're not lying, Tyler said. You're presenting the information in a way that emphasizes our strong compliance culture and robust internal controls. Our internal controls that you've overridden 47 times in 6 months. The number landed like a bomb. Marcus's face went pale. 47? 47 documented compliance violations that Tyler approved despite my written objections. All of them in the files. All of them with my formal compliance alerts attached. All of them with Tyler's signature overriding my recommendations. Those weren't violations, Tyler said quickly. Those were business decisions with acceptable risk profiles. They were violations of specific federal regulations, I said. Each one carries minimum fines between $50,000 and $2 million. Many of them carry potential criminal liability for the executives who approved them. All of them together create a pattern of willful disregard for regulatory requirements, which is exactly the kind of thing the OFR looks for when deciding whether to revoke a company's license. Marcus stood up from his desk and walked to the window, looking out at the city. His hands were clasped behind his back. I could see him thinking, calculating, trying to figure out how to handle this. Richard, he said finally, not turning around, let me be very clear. If you go to that OFR meeting and present those files in a way that damages this company, I will bury you. I will make sure you never work in this industry again. I will sue you for breach of fiduciary duty, for violation of confidentiality agreements, for anything my lawyers can think of. Do you understand me? I understand that you're threatening me for doing my job. I'm protecting this company from a disgruntled employee who wants to burn everything down on his way out. Marcus turned to face me. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to resign today. You're going to sign the separation agreement. And you're going to go to that OFR meeting on Friday and tell them that everything is fine, that our compliance processes are robust, and that there are no concerns to report. And then you're going to walk away and never speak about Meridian Financial again. And if I don't, then we fire you for cause today, we contest your unemployment claim, and we make your life as difficult as legally possible. Your choice. I stood up. 21 years had come down to this moment, standing in this office, being threatened by a man I had made rich and protected from his own stupidity more times than I could count. I'll need to think about it, I said. You have until end of business today, Marcus said. Sign the papers or clean out your desk. I walked out of his office, took the elevator down to the 4th floor, and locked myself in my office. Then I pulled out my phone and called someone I had hoped I would never need to call. Rebecca Torres, the lawyer who had helped my friend Catherine Wu with her family lawsuit 10 years ago, the lawyer who specialized in employment cases and regulatory compliance issues, the lawyer whose card I had kept in my wallet for 3 years, just in case. Rebecca Torres, she answered on the second ring. Ms. Torres, my name is Richard Lawson. I need immediate legal advice about a resignation I'm being pressured to sign, and a federal regulatory meeting I'm supposed to attend in 3 days. Tell me everything, she said. I did. Every detail. 21 years of history, Tyler's violations, the OFR meeting, Marcus's threats. I talked for 40 minutes straight while Rebecca took notes. When I finished, there was a long silence. Richard, she said finally, how much documentation do you have? Everything. Every violation, every objection I filed, every override Tyler signed, 700 pages of files, all stored in my locked office cabinet and backed up on an encrypted personal drive. Good. Here's what you need to know. If you sign that separation agreement with the confidentiality clause, you're potentially committing a crime by then providing false information to federal regulators. The OFR has a right to accurate information, and your confidentiality agreement doesn't override federal law. But if you refuse to sign and they fire you and then you tell the OFR everything, they're going to claim you're a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. So what do? You sign nothing today. You tell Marcus you need more time to review the agreement with an attorney, which is your legal right. You secure all your documentation immediately, copy everything to multiple secure locations they can't access, and you show up to that OFR meeting on Friday and tell them the truth, all of it. Marcus said he'll bury me if I damage the company. Marcus is going to have bigger problems than you when the OFR starts investigating. And Richard, the moment you walk into that federal office and present those files, you become a protected whistleblower under federal law. They can't retaliate against you without facing massive penalties. That's the law that's going to protect you, not their separation agreement. I felt something shift in my chest. Not revenge, just clarity. Do it, Rebecca said. Document everything that happened today. Email yourself a detailed summary from your personal email, and tomorrow morning we're filing a preemptive complaint with the Department of Labor establishing your whistleblower status before Marcus can spin this as a disgruntled employee situation. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get ugly, but Richard, you're holding all the cards. They just don't know it yet. I didn't sign the separation agreement that day. I sent Marcus an email at 4:47 p.m. I need time to review this agreement with legal counsel, as is my right. I will respond by Monday. Then I stayed in my office until midnight, copying every file, every email, every document that might be relevant. 700 pages became 800 when I included the email chains showing how Tyler had pressured other employees to approve questionable transactions. I backed everything up to 3 separate encrypted drives, sent complete copies to Rebecca's secure server, and emailed myself detailed summaries from my personal account with timestamps and context. Thursday morning, Marcus called me into his office again. This time, no Tyler, just Marcus and 2 people I didn't recognize, a man and a woman in expensive suits carrying leather portfolios. Richard, this is David Brennan and Sarah Cho from Whitmore & Associates, our outside legal counsel, Marcus said. His voice was cold, controlled. They're here to discuss the implications of your decision yesterday. David opened his portfolio and pulled out a document. Mr. Lawson, we've been informed that you have a scheduled meeting with the Office of Financial Regulation tomorrow regarding company compliance matters. Is this correct? Yes. We're here to remind you of your fiduciary duty to Meridian Financial as an employee and officer of the company. You have a legal obligation to protect the company's interests and confidential information. Disclosing internal company documents or communications to a regulatory agency without explicit authorization from the company constitutes a breach of that duty and violation of your employment agreement. The OFR has the authority to request any information related to our regulatory compliance, I said. I'm required by federal law to provide accurate information to regulators. You're required to coordinate with company legal counsel before making any disclosures, Sarah said. We're instructing you to postpone the OFR meeting until we can prepare appropriate responses to any questions they might have. I've tried to postpone it for 3 months. They won't accept another delay. Then you'll attend the meeting with company counsel present, David said. And you will not provide any documents or information without our explicit approval during the meeting. I looked at the 3 of them. These people who thought they could lawyer their way out of federal regulations. Are you instructing me to withhold information from federal regulators? We're instructing you to coordinate with legal counsel as required by your employment agreement, David said carefully. If you fail to do so, the company will have grounds for immediate termination and legal action. I need that instruction in writing, I said. All three of them exchanged glances. That's not necessary, Marcus said. Yes, it is. If you're directing me to withhold information from a federal regulatory examination, I need that instruction documented in writing, signed by company counsel. We're not directing you to withhold information, Sarah said. We're directing you to coordinate with us. There's a difference. Then clarify the difference in writing. Tell me exactly what I am and am not authorized to provide to the OFR tomorrow. Be specific. Another exchange of looks. We'll prepare something for you by end of day, David said. They didn't. Because of course they didn't. Because if they put it in writing, they'd be creating evidence of obstruction. Instead, Marcus sent me an email at 6 p.m. Richard, after consultation with legal counsel, we've decided that it's best if you take a paid administrative leave effective immediately while we conduct an internal review of compliance processes. Please do not attend tomorrow's OFR meeting. We'll reschedule with our counsel present. I forwarded the email to Rebecca with a note. They're trying to prevent me from attending the OFR meeting tomorrow. She called me 30 seconds later. Perfect. This is exactly what we needed. They're obstructing a federal regulatory examination. Forward this to the OFR right now, along with a message that you're being prevented from attending by company management, and ask them to postpone for 24 hours while you secure legal counsel. Won't that look bad? Richard, you're about to blow the whistle on a company that's systematically violating federal regulations. How it looks stopped mattering the moment Marcus tried to make you lie to federal investigators. Forward the email. I'm filing the whistleblower complaint with the Department of Labor tonight. By morning, you'll have federal protection. If you have ever been told to be quiet about something you knew was wrong, to protect people who were breaking the rules, to prioritize loyalty over honesty, I want you to know that the pressure you feel is real, but the choice is still yours. Hit that like button if you have ever had to choose between your career and your integrity. And in the comments, tell me, what did they threaten you with? Friday morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 emails. Rebecca had filed the Department of Labor complaint at 2 a.m., and apparently Meridian's legal team had been notified immediately. The emails ranged from threatening to pleading to offering me a revised separation agreement with triple the severance if I would just sign it and make this go away. I ignored all of them. At 9 a.m., I walked into the Office of Financial Regulation building downtown, carrying my briefcase with copies of every file I thought they'd need. The building smelled like government offices everywhere, industrial cleaning solution and old coffee and the particular staleness of air conditioning that's been running too long. I checked in at reception. The security guard called up to Senior Examiner Foster's office, and 5 minutes later, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and graying hair came down to meet me. Mr. Lawson, I'm Danielle Foster. Thank you for coming in today. I understand there have been some complications. We shook hands. Her grip was firm, professional. Yes, ma'am. My employer tried to prevent me from attending this meeting and instructed me to withhold information from your examination. I have documentation of their communications if you need it. Something flickered in Danielle's eyes. Let's go upstairs and talk. She led me to a conference room on the 3rd floor. 2 other people were already there. A younger man introduced as Examiner Marcus Chen, and an older woman introduced as Regional Director Patricia Morrison. They had legal pads, recording equipment, and the kind of expressions that said they'd seen every trick in the book and weren't impressed by any of them. Mr. Lawson, Patricia said after we all sat down, before we begin, I want to understand the current situation. You've been employed by Meridian Financial for 21 years as their Chief Compliance Officer, correct? Yes, ma'am. And you requested this meeting 3 months ago to discuss transaction review protocols, but you've postponed it several times. Why? Because I was trying to remediate the compliance issues internally before involving the OFR. I believed I could fix the problems without external intervention. But you couldn't fix them. No, the compliance violations were being driven by a senior vice president with authority to override my objections, and he was being supported by the CEO. My recommendations were ignored. And yesterday, your employer tried to prevent you from attending this meeting. Yes, they placed me on administrative leave and instructed me not to come here. They also had their outside counsel tell me that I was not authorized to provide documentation to the OFR without company approval. Patricia and Danielle exchanged a look. Mr. Lawson, I'm going to be very direct with you. What you're describing is obstruction of a federal regulatory examination. That's a serious allegation. Before we go any further, I need to know if you're prepared to back up everything you're saying with documentation and testimony. I opened my briefcase and pulled out the first binder. I have 800 pages of documentation covering 47 specific regulatory violations that occurred in the last 6 months. Each violation includes the date, the specific regulation violated, the transaction details, my formal compliance objection, and the executive approval that overrode my objection. I also have email chains showing deliberate circumvention of compliance protocols and instructions to employees to falsify transaction documentation. I placed the binder on the table. Then I pulled out a second binder and a third and a fourth, stacking them in front of Patricia. Everything is organized by violation type and chronologically within each section. I've also included a summary index with page references. The room was completely silent. Patricia pulled the first binder toward her and opened it. She read the first page, then the second, then flipped to a random page in the middle. These are internal compliance alerts, she said. With executive overrides, yes. How long have you been documenting this? Since the violation started. 6 months for this recent pattern, but I have compliance files going back 21 years showing our normal processes for comparison. Marcus Chen leaned forward. Mr. Lawson, why are you bringing this to us now? Your employer is going to claim you're retaliating for being fired. I'm not fired. I'm on administrative leave. And I'm here because I have a legal and ethical obligation to report regulatory violations to the appropriate authorities. The timing isn't retaliation. The timing is because my employer tried to prevent me from fulfilling that obligation. Patricia closed the binder and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mr. Lawson, I need to inform you that what you're providing here is going to trigger a full investigation of Meridian Financial. This isn't going to be a routine examination. This is going to be a comprehensive audit of every transaction they've processed in the last 2 years, possibly longer. The company is going to face significant fines, possible license suspension, and potential criminal referrals if what you're alleging is accurate. And they are going to come after you with everything they have. Are you prepared for that? I thought about 21 years of being told I should be grateful, 21 years of watching incompetent people get promoted while I did the actual work, 21 years of protecting a company that never protected me. Yes, I said. I'm prepared. Then let's begin. Tell me everything. The interview lasted 6 hours. They asked me about every violation, every transaction, every executive involved. They asked me about the company's compliance culture, about Marcus's management style, about Tyler's business practices. They asked me about the organizational structure, the approval processes, the documentation requirements. They asked me how I knew the information was accurate, how I had verified each violation, why I hadn't reported it sooner. I answered everything honestly, referencing specific pages in the binders, pulling up emails on my laptop, walking them through the pattern of violations that had escalated over 6 months. By 3 p.m., Patricia called for a break. She, Danielle, and Marcus Chen stepped out of the room for 15 minutes. When they came back, Patricia's expression was grim. Mr. Lawson, based on what you've presented today, we're opening a formal investigation into Meridian Financial effective immediately. We'll be issuing a document request by end of business today, and we'll be conducting on-site examinations starting Monday morning. I need to advise you that as a cooperating witness, you're protected under federal whistleblower statutes. Your employer cannot retaliate against you for providing this information. If they attempt to do so, They'll face additional sanctions. They've already retaliated, I said. They put me on administrative leave and tried to prevent me from attending this meeting. Then we'll be adding that to the investigation file. I'm also going to recommend that our enforcement division consider criminal referrals for the obstruction attempt. She paused. Mr. Lawson, I've been doing this job for 18 years. I've seen a lot of compliance officers walk into this office with selective memories and carefully curated documentation designed to protect themselves while providing minimal information about their companies. That's not what you did today. You brought us everything. You implicated yourself in some of these decisions by showing that you approved some of these transactions before you understood they were problematic. You didn't try to make yourself look perfect. You just told us the truth. That's my job, I said simply. Not anymore, it isn't. Your job now is to protect yourself and let us handle Meridian. Go get a good lawyer if you don't have one already, document everything, and don't communicate with anyone from the company except through legal counsel. I left the OFR building at 4:30 p.m., exhausted and oddly calm. My phone had been buzzing constantly throughout the interview. I finally looked at it in my car. 63 missed calls, over 100 emails and text messages, 3 voicemails from Marcus, each one angrier than the last, 5 voicemails from David Brennan, the outside lawyer, alternating between threats and pleas, 2 voicemails from Tyler, both of them incoherent rants about what I had done to him, and 1 text message from Jennifer, my assistant. Richard, they're going through your office. They brought in IT to access your computer and filing cabinets. I tried to stop them, but they said it was a security review. I'm sorry. I called Rebecca. They're raiding my office. Of course they are. They're looking for anything you might have left behind that they can destroy or use against you. Did you leave anything? Nothing important. Everything critical is backed up in 3 locations they can't access. Good. Here's what happens next. Meridian is going to file an emergency lawsuit against you, probably by Monday. They're going to claim breach of fiduciary duty, theft of confidential information, violation of your employment agreement, anything they can think of. It's going to be a scare tactic designed to make you back down or make you look like a disgruntled employee to the OFR. Can they win? Not if what you told the OFR is true. Federal whistleblower protection trumps employment agreements and confidentiality clauses when you're reporting violations to regulators. But they're going to make it expensive and exhausting. The goal isn't to win, the goal is to punish you for talking. I felt tired suddenly, bone-deep tired. So what do? You sit tight. You document everything. You don't respond to any communication from Meridian except through me, and you wait for the OFR to do their job. This is going to take months, Richard, maybe a year, but you're on the right side of the law, and that matters. That evening, I sat in my apartment and thought about what came next. 21 years of my life, gone. My career in this industry, probably over. My reputation, about to be torn apart by Meridian's PR team and legal department. My savings, about to be drained by legal fees, even with Rebecca's help. But I had told the truth. I had done the right thing, and somehow that was enough. If you are listening to this and you have ever had to blow the whistle on something corrupt, knowing it would cost you everything, I want you to know that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right anyway. Hit that like button if you believe some things are worth losing for, and subscribe to this channel so we can keep sharing stories about people who chose truth over comfort. In the comments below, tell me, have you ever been the whistleblower? What did it cost you? The lawsuit came Monday morning, exactly as Rebecca predicted. Meridian Financial filed a complaint in state court alleging breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of confidential information, breach of contract, and tortious interference with business relationships. The damages they claimed were staggering, $25 million, representing the cost of the OFR investigation, reputational damage, lost business opportunities, and punitive damages for my willful and malicious conduct. The complaint was 40 pages long, filled with inflammatory language, painting me as a disgruntled employee who had stolen confidential company documents, and provided them to federal regulators in an attempt to destroy the company after being disciplined for poor performance. They claimed I had been placed on administrative leave for concerning behavior and had violated direct instructions not to attend the OFR meeting. They attached as exhibits carefully selected emails that made it look like I had been problematic and uncooperative. They did not attach any of the compliance violations I had documented or any of my warnings to executives. Rebecca filed our response 2 days later. It was shorter, but devastating. She attached the complete documentation I had provided to the OFR, along with the email where Marcus had tried to prevent me from attending the regulatory meeting. She cited federal whistleblower protection statutes. She requested that the case be dismissed immediately and that Meridian be sanctioned for filing a retaliatory lawsuit, and she filed a countersuit for wrongful constructive termination, retaliation, and violation of federal whistleblower protections, seeking damages of $5 million. The local legal community went insane. Within a week, the case was being discussed on employment law blogs and regulatory compliance forums. Other employees from Meridian started reaching out to Rebecca, carefully and anonymously, sharing their own stories of compliance concerns being ignored, of being pressured to approve questionable transactions, of Tyler's pattern of regulatory contempt. The OFR's investigation became public when they showed up at Meridian's offices with a team of 12 examiners and document requests for every transaction processed in the last 3 years. The company's stock dropped 18% in one day. Marcus held a press conference claiming the investigation was based on false allegations from a disgruntled employee. The OFR declined to comment but noted that they don't open investigations without substantial evidence. And then the media found out about Tyler. A financial journalist at a major newspaper started digging into Tyler's background and discovered that the hedge fund he had worked for hadn't just been shut down for securities violations. Tyler had been named in the SEC complaint as one of the individuals who had falsified transaction documentation. The case had been settled with no admission of wrongdoing, but the evidence was there. Marcus had hired his nephew despite knowing about the SEC complaint, had given him authority over transaction approvals despite his history, had backed him against the chief compliance officer who was trying to prevent exactly the kind of violations Tyler had committed before. The story ran on page 3 of the business section. Financial firm under investigation, CEO's nephew had prior regulatory violations. Meridian stock dropped another 12%. 3 board members resigned. Major clients started moving their assets to competitors, and Marcus's lawyer called Rebecca with a settlement offer. They wanted to settle for confidentiality. They'd drop the lawsuit, pay me $2 million, and I would sign an agreement never to discuss Meridian, the OFR investigation, or anything related to my employment. Rebecca laughed and hung up on him. They think they can buy your silence while the OFR investigates them, she told me. They're terrified of what else you might tell federal regulators. I've already told the OFR everything. They don't know that. And they're worried about criminal referrals. If the OFR finds evidence of intentional fraud, they'll refer it to the Department of Justice. Marcus and Tyler could face federal charges. That's why they want you quiet. 2 weeks later, the settlement offer increased to $4 million. Rebecca said no. 1 week after that, it increased to $6 million, and they removed the confidentiality clause. They would drop the lawsuit, pay me $6 million, and I could say whatever I wanted about my experience. They just wanted it to go away. This is a good offer, Rebecca said. It's enough money to retire on, and you're not giving up anything. The OFR already has everything they need. Taking this settlement doesn't hurt the investigation. What do you recommend? I recommend we counter at $8 million and see if they blink. They're desperate, Richard. Their company is collapsing. Their stock is down 40%. They're facing a multi-million-dollar fine from the OFR, possible license revocation, and criminal investigation. $8 million to make you go away is a bargain. We countered at $8 million. They accepted within 24 hours. The settlement agreement was simple. Meridian would pay me $8 million over 3 months. They would drop all claims against me. They would provide a letter of recommendation confirming my 21 years of exemplary service, They would not contest my unemployment claim, and I was free to discuss my experience publicly, testify in any regulatory or criminal proceedings, and maintain all my documentation. There was no non-disparagement clause, no confidentiality requirement, no restrictions on my future employment. They were paying me $8 million to never have to see me again. I signed it. 3 days later, the OFR released their preliminary findings. Meridian Financial had violated federal regulations in 93 separate instances over an 18-month period. The violations range from inadequate disclosure requirements to falsification of transaction documentation to deliberate circumvention of regulatory oversight. The estimated fines totaled $47 million. The OFR was recommending license suspension pending remediation of compliance failures and potential criminal referrals for 3 executives: Marcus Sterling, Tyler Sterling, and Sarah Cho from outside counsel who had instructed me to withhold information from regulators. The company's stock became essentially worthless. Within 2 weeks, Meridian Financial was sold to a competitor for a fraction of its previous value. Marcus was fired as part of the sale agreement. Tyler was fired and was facing federal criminal charges for securities fraud. 300 employees lost their jobs. And I became the most hated person in the local business community and the most praised person in regulatory compliance circles, depending on who you asked. The business executives said I had destroyed a company and cost hundreds of people their jobs over a petty grudge. The compliance professionals said I had done exactly what I was supposed to do and that Meridian had destroyed itself through its own violations. I didn't engage with either narrative. I took my settlement money, moved to a different city, and started consulting for companies that actually wanted to build ethical compliance cultures instead of just checking regulatory boxes. If you have made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. If you are currently in a position where you're being pressured to compromise your ethics, where you're seeing violations that nobody wants to address, where you're being told that loyalty means silence, I want you to know that you have more power than you think. Document everything. Know your rights. Find a good lawyer. And remember that federal whistleblower protections exist to protect people exactly like you. Hit that like button if you believe that some systems need to break before they can be fixed. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so we can keep sharing stories about accountability, integrity, and what happens when people finally say no. In the comments below, tell me, have you ever had to choose between your job and your conscience? What did you choose? 2 years after the settlement, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Richard, this is Patricia Morrison from the OFR. Do you have a few minutes? I sat down. Of course. I wanted to give you an update on the Meridian investigation. The criminal case concluded last week. Marcus Sterling pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and received 2 years probation and a permanent ban from the financial services industry. Tyler Sterling pleaded guilty to securities fraud and received 18 months in federal prison plus a $10 million fine. Sarah Cho was disbarred. I absorbed that information silently. The company that acquired Meridian's assets has completely rebuilt their compliance department, using your documentation as a model for what proper oversight should look like. They've asked me to pass along their gratitude for the systems you built. That's good to hear, I said. Richard, I've been doing this job for 20 years now. I've seen thousands of compliance officers. Most of them are competent, some of them are excellent, but I've only met a handful who were willing to sacrifice everything to do the right thing when it mattered most. You're one of them. And I wanted you to know that the work you did, the stand you took, it changed things. We've used the Meridian case as a training example for examiners across the country. You set a new standard for what we expect from compliance professionals. I felt something tighten in my chest. Thank you. No, Richard, thank you. People like you are the reason this system works. After we hung up, I sat in my home office for a long time, looking at the framed letter on my wall. It was from Jennifer, my former assistant, who had written to me 6 months after the settlement. Richard, I just wanted you to know that what you did changed my life. I was so scared during all of it, watching them go after you, seeing what it cost you. But you never backed down. You never lied. You never took the easy way out. You showed me what integrity actually looks like, not as an abstract concept, but as a real choice that real people have to make in real situations. I'm in law school now studying employment law because of you. I want to be the kind of lawyer who protects people like you. Thank you for showing me what's possible. I had dozens of letters like that now, from former colleagues, from other compliance officers who had faced similar situations, from people I had never met who had read about the case and had been inspired to speak up in their own situations. The letters reminded me that the cost had been worth it, that doing the right thing, even when it destroys everything, creates ripples that spread further than you can see. My consulting practice had grown beyond anything I had imagined. I worked with companies that genuinely wanted to build ethical cultures, that understood compliance wasn't just about avoiding fines, but about operating with integrity. I made good money, better than I ever had at Meridian, and I got to do it on my own terms, helping organizations that valued the work. I had rebuilt my life from the smoking ruins of my career, and somehow, impossibly, it was better. Not easier, not without scars, but better. Because I could look at myself in the mirror and know that when it mattered most, I had chosen truth over comfort. I had chosen integrity over security. I had chosen to be someone I could respect, even if it meant losing everything else. 1 year after Patricia's call, I received an invitation to speak at the National Compliance Officers Conference, the largest gathering of compliance professionals in the country. They wanted me to give the keynote address about ethical decision-making in high-pressure environments. I accepted. The conference was held in Chicago, in a massive hotel ballroom with over 2,000 attendees. I stood backstage listening to the introduction, my hands steady even though my heart was racing. Our keynote speaker today is a man who redefined what it means to be a compliance professional in the modern era. Richard Lawson spent 21 years building one of the most respected compliance departments in the financial services industry. And when faced with a choice between his career and his principles, he chose principles. The case that followed became a landmark in regulatory oversight and federal whistleblower protection. Please join me in welcoming Richard Lawson. The applause was thunderous as I walked onto the stage. I looked out at 2,000 compliance officers, risk managers, legal professionals, and executives, all of them facing the same pressures I had faced, all of them trying to navigate the impossible balance between business demands and regulatory requirements. I told them my story, not the sanitized version, not the corporate-friendly version, but the truth. The 21 years of being undervalued, the systematic violations, the moment in the board meeting when I realized my career was over. The decision to tell the truth even when everyone told me to stay silent, the lawsuit, the settlement, the aftermath, and then I told them what I had learned. Compliance is not a popularity contest, I said. Your job is not to make executives happy or to enable aggressive business strategies or to find creative ways around regulations. Your job is to protect your company from itself. And sometimes that protection looks like saying no. Sometimes it looks like stopping deals that would make millions of dollars. Sometimes it looks like being the person everyone hates because you won't let them take shortcuts. And sometimes when the pressure gets too great and the violation's too serious, it looks like walking into a federal regulator's office and telling them everything, knowing it will end your career as you know it. The room was completely silent. I lost my job, I lost my industry, I lost relationships and opportunities in 21 years of building a career, but I kept something more valuable. I kept my integrity. I kept my ability to look at myself in the mirror and know I did the right thing, and I gained something unexpected. I gained a life where I don't have to compromise my principles to pay my bills, where I work with people who value ethics over profit, where I get to help build the kind of organizations I wish I had worked for when I was 25. I paused, looking out at all those faces. Some of you in this room are facing decisions right now, violations you're being told to ignore, pressure to approve transactions you know are problematic, executives who are treating compliance as an obstacle instead of a safeguard, and you're wondering if speaking up is worth it, if you'll survive it, if you'll regret it. I can't answer those questions for you. What I can tell you is this. The system only works if people like us are willing to hold the line. Federal regulations exist because people died, because companies collapsed, because life savings were stolen. Every rule you're being asked to bend or break exists because someone somewhere paid a terrible price. Your job is to remember that. To be the person who says no when everyone else says yes. To be the person who documents everything. To be the person who, if necessary, walks into a regulatory office and tells the truth. You are not alone. There are thousands of us who have faced these decisions. Some of us held the line. Some of us didn't. I'm not here to judge the people who chose differently. I'm here to tell you that if you choose integrity, if you choose truth, you will survive it. It might not feel like survival in the moment. It might feel like destruction, but you will rebuild, and what you build will be something you can be proud of. The applause started before I finished my last sentence and didn't stop for 3 minutes. Afterwards, I was surrounded by compliance officers sharing their own stories, asking for advice, thanking me for giving them courage. One woman, probably in her 50s, shook my hand with tears in her eyes. "I've been documenting violations at my company for 8 months," she said quietly. "I've been terrified to report them, but after hearing you speak, I know what I have to do." "Get a good lawyer first," I told her. "Document everything, know your rights, and remember, you're protected by federal law." She nodded, determination settling over her features. "Thank you." This is Richard Lawson, former Chief Compliance Officer, whistleblower, speaker, consultant, and survivor. 3 years ago, I walked into a federal regulatory office and destroyed my career to tell the truth. Today, I run a successful consulting practice helping companies build ethical compliance cultures. I speak at conferences around the country. I mentor young compliance professionals who are facing the same impossible choices I faced. And I sleep well at night, knowing that when it mattered most, I chose integrity over everything else. If my story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. We need more stories about people who held the line, who refused to compromise, who chose truth even when it cost them everything. In the comments, I want to know, what line will you hold? What principle won't you compromise? Share your story. Let's build a community of people who understand that some things are worth losing for. This is Richard Lawson signing off. Hold the line.